The Kalb Report is funded by a grant from the Ethics and Excellence in Journalism Foundation. From the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., this is the Kalb Report with Marvin Kalb.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club and to another edition of the Kalb Report. I'm Marvin Kalb. My subject today is journalism, commentary, and the O'Reilly factor. And my guest is Bill O'Reilly. I'll bet you never thought that Bill and I sort of are on the same page, but we are, sort of. 14 years ago, Bill was my student at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and when I tell friends that I gave him an A- for a grade, they express some amazement. You, Bill O'Reilly, Harvard, A-? Some of them even say, why didn't you flunk him? Bill O'Reilly is a modern phenomenon, a multi-million-dollar media corporation unto himself. He hosts a nightly one-hour cable television talk show on Fox called The O'Reilly Factor. He also hosts a 2 hours a day radio talk show called The Radio Factor. He writes a column that appears in more than 300 newspapers. He manages a busy, business-like website, BillO'Reilly.com, which tells you about Bill's favorite movies, Bill's favorite books, Bill's favorite music, and Bill's favorite charities. He also writes a newsletter, and in his spare time, because I think he's given up sleeping, he writes books, 8 of them so far, the most recent a memoir with the characteristically modest title of A Bold, Fresh Piece of Humanity. Bill O'Reilly, student, friend, pro, welcome.
Thank you, Professor. I appreciate it.
Okay. But let me warn you, Bill, as we start. This is the Kalb factor, and you're in my no-spin zone, and there are no pinheads out here at the National Press Club. Is that understood?
Should I be fearful?
I don't know. Should you?
I don't. We'll see.
Okay. By the way, the title, A Bold, Fresh Piece of Humanity, were you talking about yourself?
My third grade teacher, Sister Mary Lorana, in St. Bridget's School on Long Island, called me that and traumatized me for my whole life.
Why did she call you that?
Why not? I was a little thug. So, I was bothering her one day, and she ran down with a little ruler and said, "William, you bold, fresh piece of humanity," and whacked me with a ruler. And that was the end of me. I was then turned into a monster that you see now. It's all her fault.
I will not blame her, though. You once said, and I think it was in that book, quote, "I have to deal with some very bad people in TV land. Most of the time I defeat them." So who are these very bad people in TV land?
Well, it's divided into 2 groups. You have the unscrupulous managers and the money makers who corrupt the process in order to try to get ratings or to promote an ideology or whatever it may be. And then you have people who are backstabbers, and you worked at CBS all those years, you're familiar with them.
Actually, I never met a backstabber.
Oh, baloney. This is what I mean. If you never met them, then you weren't looking for them, because that's a rough, because I worked at CBS News too, it's a rough landscape. Because it's very competitive, and people want airtime, and people want adulation, and they want attention. So it's a rough, tough industry, television news, getting rougher as it shrinks, as the fewer jobs there are, more competition for them. And as the profit motive, when you first started, there wasn't a profit motive in news, it was a break-even proposition. Now I'm expected to deliver enormous ratings, and my program makes an enormous amount of money. So that changes everything. And it makes it harder to basically do straight news or straight reporting because I've got to deliver ratings and I've got to deliver money to my corporation.
Well, be specific. Who are the very bad people?
Well, I write about Jeffrey Immelt, the CEO of General Electric, and this is a guy who I don't believe is an honest individual. I think he's a guy who allows stuff on that is smear stuff on his cable sites. He doesn't level with the folks. There's a name. I write extensively about it. I can give you some more, but does that really serve any purpose here? Do you want me to hatchet these guys?
I don't want you to hatchet them. You use the term, so I just wanted you to...
Well, he's the big kahuna that I have a problem with him. Big problem with him.
Big problem.
Mm-hmm. I think he's ruined
Do you have a big problem with anyone at Fox?
You know, they don't bother me very much, and it's because of the profit.
Is that the way you defeat them?
I defeat them by winning my time slot and by attracting more of an audience than anyone else. That's how I defeat them. And I expose people who I believe are not being honest with the folks, whether they're on the right or the left. We go after them.
The phrase jumped out at me when I was doing a great deal of reading in preparation for this interview, and it sort of raised in my mind an image of you for a long time now as sort of having a you against them, me against the world. I had to prove myself. There was workplace injustice. I had to slug it out. And you seem to see life as a battleground, as a war zone.
My job? What I do? A populist commentator? Are you kidding? I get it from both sides. So if you're going to put yourself up as somebody who challenges authority, challenges the press, challenges big business, challenges politicians, if you're going to take them on, they're going to come back at you. So it's a war. You know, my book before Bold Fresh was Culture Warrior. So I'm a traditionalist person. People make a mistake of branding me a conservative. I'm not. But I'm a traditionalist, and I believe the country is strong, and the country has dominated the world in a good way because of its traditional core Judeo-Christian philosophy, which the other side, secular progressives, want to get away from. They don't like it. They think it's too judgmental, there's too much spirituality involved with it. And when you get into those precincts, it's a raging war, and it's 1,000 times worse than it used to be because of the internet. See, there are no standards on the internet at all. There used to be standards in newspapers, on television, things that you do and you don't do. I still have my old Associated Press handbook when I started. I still have it. And when I work for CBS, I have a big, thick CBS handbook. This is what you do, this is what you can't do. Forget it on the internet, there are no rules. People do whatever they want to do. And if they don't like you, they'll try to hurt you. So that's why you don't have a lot of people like me, because they come after you. I have to have security everywhere I go. I have to have bodyguards. I have to, you know, people attack my website. They attack my staff. They threaten us. I mean, it's unbelievable. So if you don't think there's a war out there, then you're not looking.
You were saying a couple of minutes ago that one of the reasons that you see the world in this way is that there are people out there in television land who are interested in ratings and sort of jumping in front of the public. Aren't you doing that?
Sure, absolutely.
So are you complaining about yourself?
I'm not hurting anybody in the process. There's a difference.
But aren't you hurting those people whom you criticize?
No, if I criticize those people unwarranted, I would be hurting them. But if they're hurting the folks, what am I supposed to do? Ignore
the folks being?
Regular American working people who are honest. Look, here's a good example. We have been let down twice in the last decade to the extent that it's staggering. The first was 9/11, when the Clinton administration didn't tell anybody on a mass level that you had guys in Afghanistan gunning for us. And they knew. And then Bush took over and he didn't tell us either. And then all of a sudden there's 3,000 people dead in the street. Did you know the name Al-Qaeda when they hit? Did you know it, Professor?
Yes.
Okay, I had vaguely heard about it. Did you know who they were, where they were, what they were doing?
Bill Clinton actually shot rockets into the Al-Qaeda base in Afghanistan. And that was done in 1998. So that as a good reporter, you should have known that.
I should have. Probably my fault. But I'll submit to you, I knew a little bit about Al-Qaeda. I had no idea what the threat level was. And if you did, you're much more perspicacious than I am. But I might submit
I'll
to you.
accept that, Bill.
All right. Well, I'll submit to you that 95% of the American people had no idea who Al-Qaeda was, where they were, and what they were up to.
Do you think it would have been the responsibility of the President of the United States in August of 2001 when he got a message, a note, a memo from the head of the CIA saying that Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden are planning attacks on the homeland of the United States, that he should have done something about that?
Should have had a press conference that day and told everybody in the country what it was. All right, so that's number one. And the other thing was the economic meltdown, okay, where good people were buying stocks like Merrill Lynch, like Lehman Brothers. They had no idea this bad paper was floating around. Barney Frank, he knew, Democrat from Massachusetts. Senator Dodd from Connecticut, he knew. Chris Cox, the head of the SEC, he knew. And Bush knew. They all knew. They tell the folks. Bad paper had seeped into the absolute structure of our economy. Nobody said. So my job is to try to get this stuff, and I failed both times because I didn't recognize the Al-Qaeda danger, and I had no idea about the bad paper seeping into the structure of the economy, because I had Merrill Lynch and Lehman stock, and my broker, who worked for Merrill Lynch, didn't know. So I'm blaming Barney Frank. I'm blaming Dodd. I'm blaming Cox, and I'm blaming Bush. Okay? Now, when I do that, what do you think their reaction's going to be? Get O'Reilly. So that's who I'm looking out for, and that's what I do.
Okay. Your sister Jan has said, and I hope I'm not misquoting her, misquoting you now, that when you were a very little boy, she didn't give an exact age, but a very little boy, you told her, quote, "I'm going to go on TV and tell people what to think, what's right and what's wrong." So what a way you've succeeded. Ever since you were a kid, you've been wanting to do this.
See, but I don't remember that. Maybe I did. Maybe I was drunk. I don't know.
As a kid? As a very little boy?
You know, it's a rough neighborhood, Professor. I don't remember that, but I was certainly a flamboyant kid.
No, but what about this idea of using television to tell people what is right and what is wrong? Who are you to decide what is right and what is wrong?
Everybody has to decide that.
Ah, okay.
You know, so that's
you're using the power of television to sort of convey your own point of view on
every
everybody.
human being's responsibility to decide what's right and what's wrong for them.
Absolutely.
And also to try to defeat what's wrong and try to improve what's wrong and promote what's right. So what's the best way to do that? And that's to use the power of television to get your point across.
But have you really been thinking about this for such a long time?
No. I was a high school teacher. I wasn't even convinced that media was for me until maybe I was 24 years old. And then I went back to school, Boston University, and got a master's in broadcast journalism. But I always had a sense of what was right and was wrong. There's no doubt. And I think that's my Catholic school upbringing. And I always didn't like the bullies. And I didn't like, I read about, in my neighborhood in Levittown, there was a prejudice against blacks. And we didn't have any blacks. There were no blacks. So I couldn't figure out what they were, why didn't they like blacks? And I liked Willie Mays. I thought Willie was great. All right, he was my boyhood idol. And I'm going, whoa. And then everybody in Levittown would cheer for Willie Mays. And I said, well, wait a minute, Willie's black. Well, I never got it. I never got this. So when I heard that kind of stuff, I would say to my friends, knock it off. I don't want to hear that. That's ridiculous. All right? We don't know any blacks. No blacks have ever done anything to me. And I tell a famous story, and I actually got the far left distorted the story to attack me, where my grandmother was fearful of blacks. And I said, Grandma, you never met a black person. You've never talked to a black person. But she was fearful because on television, she'd see them in cuffs coming out on the local news, eyewitness news, and she would go, well, they're going to hurt me. And I would try to I said, look, that's a very small percentage. And you're Catholic, and our philosophy in Catholicism is that we treat everybody the same, and there's no difference, and God created everybody, and so what are you doing, Grandma? And I would have conversations with my 90-year-old grandmother about stuff like this.
That's wonderful.
Now, when I gave that soliloquy on the Radio Factor, the despicable far left, who I can't tell you how bad they are, their own, all right. They took little dribs and drabs out of that, and then they put it out on the internet that I was denigrating black people. And this happens all the time. Now, they're evil, and I go after them. And I did, and I won, as I usually do. I expose them, we name the names, here are the people, here's what they do. So the mass of people who are fair in America, most Americans are fair-minded, said, oh, here's what O'Reilly said, here's the excerpts they took, look at this. I win again. But if I didn't have a radio show and a television show and a newspaper column, I wouldn't have won. So that's why this is the power that I need to get my points across.
Bill, what is your definition of a good journalist?
Somebody who's honest. So if you learn something and you don't try to spin it a different way or ignore it. And somebody who's diligent so that they get 2 or 3 people to confirm what it is they're looking for. Journalism is not a very complicated world. It's not. You need to be smart enough to know when somebody's trying to play you, and then you need to be hardworking enough to get the facts nailed down. So if they come back at you, you can say, here it is. I've been doing this bloviating for 13 years.
It's a very negative word, Bill.
No, I've made it a positive.
You have. Yeah. Check the dictionary.
I've been doing it for 13 years. We haven't had to retract one story. Not one. Now, have we made mistakes? Absolutely. I make a lot of mistakes. I'm on 3 hours a day. You're going to make mistakes. We make them, we correct them. Wrong, lawsuit, nothing.
You've never had a lawsuit against you?
Not in this.
In the last 13 years?
We have been, let me correct that. We have been sued a couple of times. It's never gotten by summary. It's always been thrown out. Never lost a lawsuit, ever. And never had to retract a story, ever. Because my staff, they're like the Navy SEALs. It's how do you know it? Where did you get it? And very rarely do we use anonymous sources. Very rarely. And you see that all the time in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and all of these guys. We don't do that. We have to, there's got to be a name attached to it, or we're not going to do it.
Do you agree with your CNN colleague Lou Dobbs that there are now what he calls advocacy journalists?
Sure. MSNBC is a left-wing network. They don't make any bones about it. They said, okay, Fox is a right-wing network. Fox is making all this money and we're not making any, so we'll go left. You know, you guys should know this. In 2008, the total revenue for the 3 news operations in cable is more than $100 billion with a B dollars. Fox has 47% of that revenue. MSNBC has 13%. So in order to jack up their revenue, they said, we'll be the Obama network. We'll be the far left network, because there isn't one of those, and that's where we'll go. Now, you want to watch them, you watch them. I don't care.
Do you think it is good journalism for one network like Fox to be regarded as the right-wing network and MSNBC to be seen as the left wing, starting with that? Do you think that's good journalism?
That's a loaded question.
Of course it is.
Because I don't, listen, if you watch Fox News coverage, hard news coverage, it's not conservative, it's down the line. I mean, you look at our hard news people, not the commentators, but Shepard Smith, that kind of a situation. They just report the news the same way they report it on CBS. And there's never been any kind of beef with that. It's beef with me, Sean Hannity, that kind of stuff. So, do I have a problem with Fox News and their reportage? I have no problem.
Do you have a problem with the reportage then of MSNBC?
They don't do any reporting. They don't have any newscasts.
What about CNN? You place them right in the middle?
I have no beef with them. I think they lean left. There's a culture like they have at CBS and ABC. But I don't have any real beef with them.
There's a culture at CBS and NBC to lean left?
Leans left. You know that. You worked there for a while.
No, I don't know that.
Oh, stop.
And that is a wonderful thing that you've just done.
Ridiculous.
You've just done. Everybody knows that. Taking a look at your scripts every single night What I've come upon are these great phrases that you have. Everybody knows that.
I wanna
and
get
you
you
sort
on
of overwhelm the environment.
I want to get you on the record, Professor. You're going to sit here
No,
and
I'm
tell
not
me.
you on the record.
Well, all right, you can get me on the record. You're going to sit here and tell me that you do not believe that there is a culture of liberalism at CBS News.
You have used different word now. Liberalism before you were saying left.
You're parsing.
No, I'm not parsing,
Okay, you
sir.
explain it then.
I will. Liberal is a broad philosophical approach to life. Left refers to a specific political point of view. You are using both in the exact same way.
I'm saying there's
And
a
you're saying that
sympathy.
everybody knows that, but everybody doesn't.
Well, they should because it's there.
That's in your opinion.
No.
What is right and what is wrong.
I'll ask you again. Are you going to deny
Yes.
there is a liberal culture at CBS News? Are
There
you
is a
going to deny
liberal,
that?
I hope there is a liberal culture in America.
Well, you're crazy. Look, I'll prove my case right here.
Go ahead.
All right? Walter Cronkite. All right? Walter Cronkite. Is
Liberal
there a
culture?
more far-left guy in the country right now than Walter Cronkite?
Right now is different. He's not on the air now.
I
No,
just,
no,
I
Bill,
just
this
said
is important.
culture. All right? Walter Cronkite,
Walter
far-left guy.
Cronkite was, in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s,
Yeah.
by 83%, the most trusted man in America.
Just
That
saying
is
the
what
culture.
he did in front of a camera.
What you do in front of the camera doesn't have anything to do with the culture.
He can do what he likes. He's now
Walter
retired.
Cronkite, far-left guy. Okay? Dan Rather.
You didn't get an answer from the audience.
Right. I mean, look, I'm just putting my case out there. Walter Cronkite, far-left guy. Dan Rather, Dan Rather. Okay. You go down the list. My good friend Mike Wallace, who I think is the best, okay, he'll tell you he's a left-wing guy. Andy Rooney, he'll tell you he's a left-wing guy. In fact, Andy Rooney went on 60 Minutes and said, everybody at CBS is left-wing. Did you miss that? So don't give me any of this, Professor, with all due respect. Don't give me any of this. It isn't a left-wing liberal culture at CBS. It is. And it's a left-wing liberal culture at ABC. I worked there. My friend Peter Jennings, the late Peter Jennings, was a very liberal man, but he was furious about it. He didn't want that, but it was all over the place. NBC is off the chart. I had Andrea Mitchell. You know Andrea Mitchell? She's a good friend, right?
Yes.
Okay. I had her on my program. Did you see that interview?
No.
I said, Andrea, name one conservative who works for NBC News. One name. Couldn't do it. Now, one name.
Give
Woman's
me
been there
one liberal
35
who works
years.
at Fox. One
Alan
liberal.
Coles.
You
Who's
got
winning
one.
so far?
You got one.
No, I can give you 5. I mean, it's...
Hang on a sec.
All right,
You remember the movie Network?
I do.
The TV anchor Howard Beale, who was resurrected his career by suddenly shouting, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore."
Right,
Right. Are you mad as hell?
I am.
You like being mad as hell.
I don't think I like it, but I think the folks are getting the shaft a lot of the time.
Is it possible, with justification, for people to believe that you're simply participating in an act, that you're not really as mad as you present yourself, but you want the ratings, and you are doing what you think is successful in the modern world of television?
No,
that
I'd
you
have to
like?
be Laurence Olivier to do it for 13 years, wouldn't I? You know, if I'm going to act every night for 13 years and convince millions of people who believe what I say, I'd have to be the best actor. I make Marlon Brando look like Luke Perry, okay? So if you want to think that, Professor, you, Walter, and Dan go out for dinner and chuckle about it.
Okay. Good line. Good line. Do you ever relax?
Yeah, I relax. I'm a big reader. I read a lot and go to the games. Big sports guy. I'm a diver. I go into water. I have a historical collection that I, mess around with. So yeah, you got to get away from it. That's for sure. But I work 60 hours a week.
I'm wondering, you spoke before about your time at CBS and at ABC. During your time at both of those networks, you didn't quite make it there. And
ABC I did. CBS wasn't a pleasant experience. But
Was
ABC I was
not.
on the air, and I was there 2 years. I was on the evening news more than 100 times. So, I mean, that's pretty big. You know how big that
an
is.
ABC colleague of yours says he reeked of local. He was rough, and unvarnished. In response to that, you said, I refuse to be big-footed and patronized.
Right.
Give me an illustration of a time when you were big-footed and patronized.
Well, I was down in Argentina for the Falklands War.
That was CBS, wasn't it?
Yeah. Do you want me to do ABC?
Do CBS. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Because I'll tell you, it never happened at ABC because I looked at Rune Arledge in the eye. I said, don't hire me if you're going to do that to me. And he said, okay, I won't do it to you.
Do what?
Bigfooting. All right? Bigfooting is when you do a story and some pinhead, bigger correspondent who's lazy or drunk takes the story away from you, and he appears on the, or she appears on the evening news. Professor Kalb's well acquainted with it. Not that he did it, but it's been around for a long time. So I was down in Argentina, Falklands War, very dangerous. Argentines are losing. Galtieri is a dictator, goes out on TV and says, we're losing the war. Now, he had told them, this guy's like a General Electric CEO, he had told everybody up until that time they were winning, they were kicking Britain's butt. He goes out, he says, we're losing. The place erupts, goes crazy, all right? People in the street, they try to storm the Casa Rosada, which is the pink palace where Galtieri lived, like the head of the government. So they're in there, and I was down there, and I get a call from the CBS bureau chief to say, O'Reilly, get down there. Great. I'm down there, I got my 2 crews. So I'm looking around, where are the other CBS correspondents? I don't see anybody. Okay, maybe they're busy, maybe they're on the other side of the Casa Rosada, I don't know where they are. So anyway, all hell breaks loose. The people start to storm the Casa Rosada. The Argentine troops shoot the people down in the street. They shoot them down. It's not like rubber bullets or gas. It's people are dying, all right? So anyway, I get my crew, and I grab my crew away. We're down a side street. We're shooting all this stuff. It's unbelievable. I mean, people just falling, bing, 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 bing. Soldier runs down the street. I'm there. Photographer gets trampled, all right? So he's on the ground. I grab him and the camera, and drag him into a doorway. The soldier comes up, and he's standing maybe 10 feet away. He's got the M16 pointing at my head. I thought it was over. And I said, periodista no dispare. That means journalists don't shoot. Por favor. Guy was about, I don't know, 18, 19 years old. He didn't shoot me. Went down the street. I mean, I'm like this, sweat, you know. So I get my guys. We go back to the car, which is 3, and we jump in the car, go to the Sheraton Hotel, feed this video back. Rather leads with it on the evening news. Okay, this is a special 11:30. So I said, man, it's going to be great. This is my big break. I'm going to get on. I'm going to be Dan. I'm Bill. It's going to be Dan, Bill, you know, and break again. I never got on the air. They took all my tape, everything like that, gave it to somebody else. I'm not going to mention who it is. Still working.
It was Bob
today.
Schieffer, wasn't it?
Well, I'm not mentioning. You know, that was CBS News.
Do you think that Bob Schieffer deliberately took the story away from
I
you?
don't care. All I know was he wasn't there. So let me ask you a question.
No, no.
Oh! Wait, Professor.
Put your finger down. Put
Come
your
on.
finger.
Let me ask you a question.
Put your finger.
Would you have done that?
Put your finger.
Would you have done that?
Put your finger.
Would you have done that?
I want to take a moment
Nah,
at this time
I wouldn't do that.
to remind our radio and television audiences that this is the Kalb Report. I'm Marvin Kalb, and as you might have guessed, this is Bill O'Reilly.
So you're not going to answer my question, are you?
Of course I'll answer your question.
Would you have done that? You weren't there. You didn't go there. You didn't see the story. You didn't cover the story. Would you have taken somebody else who almost got killed, all their tape, and he actually took, the CBS took my notes, took my notebook.
Didn't CBS pay you?
Yeah, they paid me, man.
All right.
Nice
You were
salary.
being, just a minute, you were being paid to be a reporter.
Right,
Okay. You covered the story.
correct,
You were paid to cover the story.
correct.
What the producer does with it in New York is not your business.
So I'm not working for that kind of an outfit.
No, and you didn't.
That's right.
Okay.
Bye. Sayonara.
Bill, let's talk current history for a while. The Iraq War. When that war started, you were very much for it, but then afterward, you began to call it a big mistake.
Right.
Why were you for it?
Because I believe the intelligence that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And
You
because
believe
of
what you were told was the intelligence?
No,
Did you see the intelligence?
well, let's put it this way. we talked to people in British intelligence, Egyptian intelligence, we the factor staff, and Jordanian intelligence to confirm what the United States intelligence was putting out, all right? So I'm going, if Blair, Mubarak, and the Jordanian guys are saying the same thing, who am I to say it's bull?
Bill O'Reilly, you do that every
No,
night.
I'm a logical thinker. No, I don't. I don't ever go against basis of belief when it's from a credible source. So I've got 4 intelligence outfits saying the same thing. I've also got Abu Nidal and Abu Abbas inside Iraq. Notorious terrorists. Notorious. I've also got Salman Pak. You know what that is? That's the park where they train the terrorists to go out to Hezbollah.
Oh, that was supposedly
Right.
in Baghdad.
Right. No, supposedly. It's there. Okay. So now I'm saying they're training terrorists. They got 2 of the biggest guys living there. And they got all of this stuff confirmed by 4 other intelligence agencies. I got Tony Blair out there telling me the same thing. I got Bush. And I got Bill Clinton saying the same thing. I got Clinton. I got Bush. I got Blair. Okay. I'm
All
not
right, so on the
Karnak.
basis of that, you decided
I say-
that you would go with it.
Absolutely. And no, and it was
Okay.
more. Saddam had violated 17 ceasefire regulations.
Well, now you sound
set
like
up.
the Bush White House.
No,
I
I'm not
mean, you're
sounding
just
like that.
ticking everything off.
Yeah, because that's
But
why I
what-
made my decision that
Okay,
way.
do you feel now that you were lied to then?
No.
You
I
don't
think it was
feel
a
you were
mistake.
misled?
No, I think they made a mistake. I think that these intelligence agencies, what they uncovered was wrong. It wasn't a lie, it was a mistake.
And you believe all of these governments, all were mistaken for the exact same reason? They were all taken in?
I believe that they all made the mistake because Saddam's generals, after Saddam fell, said publicly, we thought he had weapons of mass destruction because he was telling us that. So, if Saddam's own generals thought he had WMDs, you could see why that would get out to other intelligence agencies.
Okay, and when did you decide that it was all a mistake?
When I decided very early on when there was massive looting in Baghdad and all the armaments were looted and no American forces stopped it. And I said it on the air.
That was within the first 2 months.
Yeah, I said it on the air. I said,
I know you
"What's
said
this?"
on the air, I heard that, but at the same time, were you saying that the reason that we went into Iraq was wrong?
No.
You were just criticizing the looting.
The reason I turned against the war in the sense that it wasn't being waged appropriately was because they had no strategy. What happens after Saddam? Chaos. Now, in any war planning, you have worst case scenario. Tommy Franks did not have worst case scenario, as we know now.
When you were telling the American people that the war was such a great idea, were you also telling them that you ought to be a bit skeptical about war planning? Because every now and then, as you look through history, you find one example of a mistake after another. Were you telling this to your people too?
Number one, I wasn't telling anybody that the war was a great idea. I said it was justifiable based upon what we know. That's number one, so I must correct you because I know you always want to be accurate. Number two, I can only, from my perch in New York, all right, I can only assess the situation based upon the dispatches that I get. And we were in touch with our FARC's correspondents, and basically the guy that turned it for me was Harrigan, Steve Harrigan, one of our bravest
He's
correspondents.
very good.
Who said to me, I said, look, Steve, what the hell is going on there? You know, we knocked these guys out, and now there doesn't seem to be any control. He goes, I can't go out for a cup of coffee. And I said, why not? He goes, because we don't have enough guys to control these crazies, and the crazies know it. Then I reported to American people accurately, hey, look, this is not the way you do it. So I have no trouble removing Saddam Hussein, none, to this day. The guy had to go. He violated 17 Gulf Wars. The first time he violated, we should have removed him, okay?
When you say he had to go, why does that automatically make it our responsibility to make sure that he goes? Why isn't it the responsibility
Because we're the leader
of
of
the
the
Iraqi
world.
people? We're
Well,
the leader
Iraqi
of the world.
people, you know, they don't have any power. We're the leader of the world, and
Are
we're
we still the
basically-
leader of the world?
Yeah, I believe we are.
Even after Iraq?
Yeah, we'll get over Iraq, and we actually turned it into a victory. It's a Pyrrhic victory, in my opinion, not worth the blood and treasure.
Okay.
But it's a victory.
Let's talk about patriotism. Definitions of patriotism through American history. One of those that jumps out is my country, right or wrong. You accept that?
No.
How would you define patriotism?
Patriotism is love of country and trying to improve it. Simple.
So you would agree with Senator Kerry of Massachusetts, whom you would define as a well-known liberal,
And you
who
wouldn't?
said,
Wait, and
No,
you
no,
wouldn't
no,
define
no,
him
no,
as a
no.
well-known liberal?
Let me finish my sentence.
Okay, but
Let me finish the
when you
sentence.
throw stuff out there, what do you think? I'm
Let
going to
me
sit here and
finish
let
the
it go?
sentence.
I
Let me
mean, you're
finish.
my teacher. You know I'm going to let that go.
Let me finish the
Who
sentence.
I would define as?
Whom you would define as.
Okay, that's like saying I would say there's snow in Alaska. It's ridiculous.
Would you let me finish my
No,
question?
all right, go ahead.
Senator Kerry said
Yes.
in the 2004 election when his patriotism was questioned,
I stuck up
That-
for him, by the way.
I'm glad to hear that. What he said was that definition of patriotism, my country right or wrong, yes, my country, when right, praise it, when wrong, try to fix it.
No problem with that.
Good.
No, I'm glad you approved, Professor.
Good. Thanks. Bill, I gave you an A minus.
And he only gave me the minus for spite. I deserved an A.
Military service. You look like a big, strong, strapping kid. You ever served in the
No.
U.S. military?
No, I never served in the military.
Why?
It was basically at the end of the Vietnam War when I was out of college and the draft was being abolished, and I had a decision. I could have enlisted, of course, but I had a teaching opportunity, and I thought that would be a better way to go since, you know, the military was winding down a war, and that was a decision I made.
Okay.
My father was a naval officer. My grandfather served in World War I, was in New York City PD, so we had that tradition. I talked it over with my dad. I said, you know, I'm interested in maybe going to the MPs, military police, you know, and he goes, well, you know, look, let's see how it shakes down. You know, this is winding down, let's see what they do. You got a teaching opportunity to help some kids down there in Florida. So that's what I decided to do.
During the 2004 presidential election, as you look back upon the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, what do you make of them?
Well, it's on the record. I mean, I didn't like that whole campaign. I thought it was ridiculous. My basic tenet was this. What you do when you're 21 and 22, you got to cut somebody slack. So if Kerry made mistakes
Okay.
and this and that, I mean, come on. Look at you when you were 21 and 22. Professor, you were in prison, I believe, weren't you? You got to cut people some slack. So from the jump, I said on my show, this is ridiculous. You don't like Kerry, fine, but this is what you're going to do? Here's a guy who was on a PT boat on the Mekong. Come on. I mean, how many people were on a PT boat in the Mekong? Come on. So Kerry appreciated it. You know, he called me up, and, you know, I took some heat from the far right on it. I don't care. I did what was right.
Do you believe that a president who avoided military service himself should be sending young men and women to fight in what are called wars of choice?
I'm talking about Bill Clinton? Is that who we're talking about?
No.
No? What are you talking about?
I'm talking about George W. Bush.
He's in the National Guard. So you're not talking about Clinton, who wasn't in the military at all.
That's a different issue.
Wasn't
We
he
can
president?
talk about, no, we can talk about both.
No. You posed a question with
Bill
the word
Clinton
president
did
in
not
it.
start a war such as the Iraq War. Bill
Bosnia and
Clinton
Kosovo, what was that?
well, hardly that. There were
It
no
was hardly
casual-
that. It was an intervention by the United States
there was-
over in the Balkans.
Do you know what the casualty rate was?
How do we know what was going to
Do
happen?
you know what the casualty rate was?
A couple of hundred?
Less than that.
No, the casualty rate was a
Much
couple hundred.
less than
No, it
that.
was a couple hundred.
No, it wasn't. The point that I'm trying to
Now,
get
if
at,
I'm right, what
the
happens? Do I
point
get
that I'm
money or
trying
a
to
prize?
get at, Bill, you're doing very well, but you're not answering the question.
Look,
And you know darn
no,
well
it's
you're
another,
not.
it was another left-wing
I
question.
want to know-
You wanted to hit
No,
Bush,
you see, you are
and then I
starting-
hit you with Clinton, and you were going, uh-oh, I forgot about him. Come on. Now I'll answer the question. If the American people
What you
elect
have
the
just
commander in
done-
chief,
What you have just done
yes,
is a classic O'Reilly.
Of course, I'm right.
Right. And what you have just done,
Classic O'Reilly is that I'm right.
right. Not that you're right.
Of course
But
I'm
that
right.
no,
You
you're
loaded
not.
it up with President. I hit you with Clinton. He dodged the draft, and you didn't know what to say.
I
Come
know
on.
that he dodged the draft.
These are smart. These are smart kids. out here.
If you want to deal,
No, you wanted to get Bush.
Do you wanna-
And I hit you with the Clinton. All right. You want me to answer the question? If the American
you don't know the
people-
question.
Yes,
yet.
I do. You
No,
just
you
said
don't.
it.
No, you don't.
If the president didn't serve, should he be able to send people into battle? That's a question, correct?
No, into wars of choice.
Oh, it's a war of choice, like
right.
the Balkans.
No,
No. That wasn't a war of choice?
no.
No?
I'm talking about.
We had Milosevic invading Virginia? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. You see what you made? It's all you. You did. Go ahead.
I should have flunked you.
You should have.
Continuing with my line of questioning, I am talking about President Bush. I am talking about the Iraq War. And I am talking about what you think of a president who avoids service in Vietnam, criticizing the patriotism of someone who volunteered, something you didn't do when you had a chance to, volunteered to serve in Vietnam, had 3 Purple Hearts, 3 medals for courage
I didn't see
and
Bush
honor.
criticizing Kerry for that.
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
He
when?
criticized the patriotism. I can
Kerry's
give you the quotes.
patriotism?
Yes.
Well, you'd have to give
Be
me
happy
because
to give you the quotes.
I didn't see that. But look,
Well, no, I want to
just
answer
as
the
I said,
question.
you have to cut Kerry some slack when he was 21, 22.
Why do
think
I have to cut him some slack? He
Kerry?
didn't do anything wrong.
Anybody back
What did he
then-
do that was wrong?
Well, some people would say throwing your medals
Who
in
are
a
some
garbage.
people?
Me.
Ah,
All right. Some people might say throwing your medals in a garbage
it
wasn't
was
a good
not a
decision.
garbage dump. It was
Wasn't
a
a good
heap of
decision.
other medals.
I'm saying that's not a good decision. I'm saying
That
I'm
may
cut-
be not a good
I'm
decision,
cutting
but
Bush,
he was there
and
in
I'm cutting
Vietnam.
Kerry slack when they did stuff in their 20s. You don't want to cut them slack? Don't. I am.
You said before that you're not a Republican, that you're a traditionalist,
Not a conservative.
not a conservative, excuse me. But you are a Republican.
No, I'm an independent.
You're an independent.
Registered independent.
Have you ever voted Republican?
Have I ever voted Republican? I don't tell people who I vote for.
You ever vote Democratic?
Same question, same answer. I don't tell people what I vote for.
Okay. Do you,
Don't endorse, don't tell.
do you believe that when the British newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, ran a list of 100 American conservatives, you were listed as number 82?
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you regarded that as a compliment or an insult.
Number one, the Daily Telegraph means nothing to me, and they had to fill their space, so they filled it. Look, I don't care what they think. Why do I care? I'm a registered independent. I take a traditional view of the country. I think that it's a noble country. I've always felt that way. I think the traditional values of Judeo-Christian philosophy have made us very strong. And I think we have a society that needs to be improved on a number of different levels, but it is basically a good venture. It provides more opportunity, the United States does, than any other country
Absolutely
in the
agree.
history of civilization. So that's where I am. Now, if the dopey Daily Telegraph wants to put me on some ridiculous list, go right ahead. I don't
Okay.
care.
Okay. Run through a couple of items with me and then explain your position. On abortion, what is your position on that?
Abortion, I believe, is a private decision that the public square, now public square is probably the way, the government has to decide what the human rights element of abortion is. And the government never has decided that. So we know DNA is present at conception. So that takes away any kind of, well, it's a fetus or something you can just throw in the garbage or something like that. It elevates it up. So there's DNA present at conception. Okay. So you start there. So then I say to myself, it's not the government's job to basically tell people what to do. But there's another potential person involved here, the fetus. So I use potential person because that you can't argue with that. So I say, okay, let's get a sane policy on this. We don't have a sane policy now. We have a lot of emotion. We have a lot of political stuff. And I think that most Americans say If we could eliminate all abortions, that would be the best. But I also think most Americans don't want a law against it, because that's not going to eliminate the abortions. You see? See how complicated it is? If we could eliminate abortions, I think 90% of Americans would say, that's good. Let's do that. All right? It's not a good thing. But you can't eliminate it by outlawing it. Doesn't work. And then you create unintended consequences and more problems, all kinds of stuff. So the government, I think, should basically take this much more seriously than it does. Because it's really a human rights issue. When you have more than 1 million babies, potential human beings, terminated, I think you got to think about that.
It's pro-choice, isn't it?
You know, I wouldn't encourage anyone to have an abortion if it were, I'll tell you a story, and I wrote about this in Culture Warrior. A girl came to me, a friend of mine, said, look, I'm pregnant and can't have the baby, and I have to have an abortion. I don't have any money. Will you help me? Will you lend me the money? And I really liked this person, and I knew she was in a real jam. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I can't have that on my sheet, my conscience. But what I will do is I'll support you monetarily, and I'll find a place for you to live and give you money until you have the baby, and then I'll arrange for Catholic Charities to put it up for adoption. I'll do it all. That's what I'll do for you.
Okay. Gay rights. Where do you stand or sit on that?
Gay rights, I mean...
Should gays have rights?
Sure, they're Americans.
Right. Including the right to marriage anytime, any place?
You know, here's my problem with the gay marriage deal. If you let the gays marry, then the polygamists have to marry too. Then the commune people marry, the triads marry, then you marry your cousin, and then you marry a duck, right? I mean, you get into that thing like, okay, you want the gays to, and by the way, do I care about this? Not really. I don't care what Lenny and Squiggy do. I don't care. They want to get married, let them get married. But
so
if you're going to do equal justice,
right,
then if you open it up for one group, you got to open it up for all the groups.
Okay.
And they have done that in Holland.
In terms of gays, you would have no problem with marriage?
Personally,
Yeah.
I don't care.
Okay.
For the society, it's a complicated issue.
Right. Now, I've read that you yourself, though, support gays having the right to adopt children.
Yes.
Now, explain that.
Well, why not? I mean, if there's a kid in the system that nobody wants, you're going to keep the kid in the system and not give him to 2 guys or 2 girls who really want to take care of the kid? I mean, that's pretty rough on the kid, is it not? Right. So you're agreeing with all this liberal stuff?
I agree with parts of the O'Reilly philosophy.
As long as they're liberal.
No, so long as they're consistent with my image of the goodness of America.
Okay. Do you agree with any of my conservative positions?
Yes.
Inquiring minds.
I do.
Inquiring minds.
Indeed.
Like what?
Is this the Kalb report of the O'Reilly family?
Well, you and Walter and Dan talking over at dinner.
Will you pay?
I will. You know, I pay for that. If you get a tape recording of you, Cronkite, and Rather at dinner talking about me,
oh, no,
anywhere
no,
you want.
Believe me, they're not talking about
Oh, they
you.
are.
No, they're not.
Yeah, they don't.
I don't want to hurt your feelings,
They don't
but
like
they're
it.
not.
For a free meal, they would.
I don't want to hurt your feelings, bro. The United Nations, you once said dismissively, all those people do is go out to lunch. But that is not all the United Nations does.
No, they go to dinner too.
And I think you know that. You know that. Don't you? Don't you know that it's more, that the UN does a lot more?
Yeah,
to
I
go
know
out to
that
lunch
they
and dinner?
steal oil money and they run away in Africa when there's a mass slaughter. I know they do all those other things as well, but I thought I was going to be easy on them and just make fun of them about the lunch.
I see. What I would like to know is, why do you say that?
Because they're pinheads.
Because they're pinheads.
Yeah, the whole place is corrupt. Didn't you get the oil for food scandal?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't you get the Rwanda slaughter? You didn't get all that? You missed all that?
Yeah.
Come on. The United Nations? You asked a good question
What would you
before.
do
Why
in place
does
of the
America
UN?
always have to do this? Why does America always have to go to the Balkans? The UN wouldn't go to the Balkans, would they? No. They wouldn't stop
NATO
ethnic
went.
cleansing.
NATO
No, NATO is not the UN.
No.
I'm down with NATO. They're great.
Oh, you like
Okay,
NATO?
yeah, I like NATO. UN? Ridiculous.
Okay.
Look, come on.
Let me keep going.
Yeah, you
Let me
better,
keep going.
because don't get me on the UN here. You better keep going. Go ahead.
I'd like to know why, as a matter of fact, you pander to people who know so little about major issues.
I pander to people
Yes.
who know little
So
about
little
major
about
issues.
major issues.
I'm a nice guy. That's all. That's why I do it. Don't want to hurt their feelings. If I feel someone doesn't know anything, I'm charitable toward that person. I don't want to hurt their feelings. You got some names there that I pander to? Professor. Right.
Evan Thomas at Newsweek
Who am I pandering to?
described you as every man on a bar stool, mad as hell, but with a wink. And I'm trying to discern in the last hour the wink.
I've been
Which I
making
don't
fun of
quite
you for the
see.
last hour, Professor.
You haven't been making fun of me, you've been making fun of yourself.
Okay, well, and that's a good thing. You self-deprecating, you have
Is
to be.
excellent.
You have to
And
do
you
that.
should really keep that up.
Thank you.
I would like to know how you would like to be remembered
You know,
after
on
you
my-
kick the bucket.
On my tombstone, I've already ordered this inscription.
Oh, good.
He finally stopped talking.
That's very good.
So you like that one? That's a self-deprecating thing.
That's very good, Bill. I appreciate that. I think that I would like to find out a little bit more about what makes you tick, because I find you a most remarkable phenomenon, as I said at the very beginning. In the book Culture Warrior, you wrote a great deal about slights and wounds that you have suffered at the hands of people. And once again, I'm sorry, but I get back to this image of a guy on a battlefield who doesn't have terribly much fun, but is constantly at war. At
Well,
war with his surroundings.
The book is Culture Warrior, Professor.
Yeah,
I'm writing
that's
about the culture war.
Right.
I could write about O'Reilly goes to the beach. All right?
Why don't
And
you?
Because
It doesn't
number
sell.
one, it wouldn't sell any. But,
It wouldn't
but then I
sell.
could say, well, I had fun here, and I had fun there, and then I had lobster, and then we did the, cha-cha-cha. Come
I
on.
think- well,
I'm
come on,
Culture
if somebody
Warrior,
is
it's
as-
about the conflict
The
Come on.
conflict that you perceive is going on,
that I perceive.
yes,
No, the conflict that's going on in the country is a culture
that you perceive is going on in the country.
Perceive.
Is it going on all over the world?
I don't know. I don't live in Uruguay.
No, but
It's
you
going
do-
on here.
You do read.
Yeah,
You do watch
is it going
television.
on? Is it going on all over the world? No. Is there a culture?
Just in the
Is
United
there a culture
States.
war in Iran? No.
Just in
because
the
they
United
cut your head
States.
off. That's why.
Just in the United States.
No. The other countries too. Is there a culture war in Iran? No. Because if you're a secular
I'm not
progressive,
talking about Iran. I'm
well,
talking
that's
about
part of other parts of the world.
Western Europe,
Some
Japan?
nations.
India?
There's a culture war.
Brazil. I mean, is it all going on all over the world?
There's a culture war in some nations, and in other nations there isn't. Not a culture war in Japan. I mean, it's a homogenous society. It's a traditional society. They do what they've always done. You seem to not want to engage this, but in the Muslim world, there are no secular progressives. You would have been beheaded, rather, me, we'd all been beheaded a long time ago there. So there's no culture war there. But in free societies, vibrant societies, Great Britain, Canada, United States, certainly there is a culture war.
But you know what's interesting, Bill, is that in a place like Egypt and in a place like Iran, according to fairly good intelligence, which you seem to put a great deal of weight on, there are culture wars going on now.
Very little.
Very little, yes,
Very
but there
little.
are culture
Very
wars
dangerous.
going on.
Very dangerous for
It's
those
at the
people.
university, it's among writers, it's among many of the people that I would like to believe you would actually, if you were in a position to support,
I would support them.
you would.
But sure, but
You would
very tough for
support
them.
people who would object to the position of the government in power.
Depends
If
what
the government in
is.
power were
If the government's tyrannical, absolutely.
tyrannical, you would support these people.
I mean, these poor people in Burma and all of that. I mean, you got to support those
So
people.
that in the old days in the Soviet Union, when somebody would come along like that, you would support them?
Absolutely.
Okay. That is a very good thing. And that is a good thing, too, to know that Bill O'Reilly on 9/11 went down to a low Manhattan restaurant and served meals to people. And you didn't do it with a camera, you did it because you thought it was the right thing
I
to
didn't
do.
do nearly enough. Yeah, I did that.
But you did
that's
do
no
that.
big deal. You know, what I did
But-
for 9/11, here's what I did.
No, but you can't because our time's up.
Okay.
And you've used that phrase in the past before, and I'm really sorry that it's up. Because first of all, I'd like to thank our wonderful audience who've really been in it. And most especially, I want to thank Bill O'Reilly for spending an hour with one of his former professors, with full respect. And most of all, I want to thank all of you out there in radio and television land who continue to cherish the idea of a free press in our free society. I'm Marvin Kalb. Goodbye and good luck.